The woke and weird Attorney General of New York State, Letitia James, is in a lot of trouble. And she's lawyering way up in a very, very big way. Letitia James, of course, went after President Trump in a totally bogus case. We'll get to that. Yeah, she has hired Abbe Lowell because there are serious questions being raised about her mortgage situation and real estate situation. Abbe Lowell, there he is with Hunter Biden. Abbe Lowell will say anything. You remember Hunter Biden would go off for these lavish dinners around the world with criminals and like the king of Kazakhstan and this guy and that guy. And all of a sudden, right before dessert, Joe Biden's father would call, the sitting vice president of the United States. Oh, hello, Dad. Why don't you talk to the king and prince of Siam? And why don't you talk to this oligarch? And what? The craziest, weirdest thing ever. But he went around with a straight face trying to say that was normal.
If the most people that are criticizing the Biden family is that when the president calls his son every day and it goes on the speakerphone, he says hello to the people in the room, that is not an offense. That is nothing other than a loving father.
No, that's a corrupt arrangement, and that's showing off. And that's not the only thing. There are about 1 million others, okay? A dirty family. So Letitia James has hired that man right there because she's in trouble.
What's going on, everybody? Thank you all for joining me today. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new to the channel, and most importantly, please make sure you are following me on Telegram at TD Media Group to help circumvent social media censorship and shadow banning. And with the introduction out of the way, let's get into today's news. And today, we have to head back to New York once again to discuss who Letitia James, aka Big Tish, right? We have to discuss Letitia James again because, as many of you know, she recently lawyered up, but many of you may not know who her lawyer is. And who she decided to hire as her lawyer is the former lawyer of Hunter Biden. Yes, the man that lost Hunter Biden's federal gun charge case and the man that suggested that Hunter Biden plead guilty to his federal tax case is now representing Letitia James. So we're talking about a guy who was 0-2 concerning Hunter Biden. And now Letitia James said, well, that's the guy that I'll have represent me against Pam Bondi. This sounds like a recipe for disaster. He definitely wouldn't have been my first choice as a lawyer. But what do I know? I guess apparently Letitia James knows best. So now what has transpired since she acquired Hunter Biden's former lawyer as her lawyer is that he recently issued a letter out to Pam Bondi. And in this letter, he's laying out his evidence as to why the mortgage fraud allegations against Letitia James is just a witch hunt. And that's what I want to go through today. I want to take a moment to go through this letter. And what was expected to happen is that him sending this letter is an attempt to persuade Pam Bondi to drop the investigation altogether. But I highly doubt that that's going to happen. So I'm going to skip through the first couple of paragraphs here, because in the first couple of paragraphs, he's not talking about anything. He essentially is just wagging his finger at Donald Trump, saying that this is a witch hunt and this is retaliation and you're on a revenge tour. Oh my God, how dare you? And then he speaks to Pam Bondi, in which he states to her essentially, hey, you know, when you took the oath of office and became attorney general, you swore to protect the Constitution and to not weaponize the DOJ, and we expect you to do that, right? And she's not weaponizing the DOJ, right? This is a proper, legitimate investigation that's going on. And with the way in which Hunter Biden's former lawyer is twisting and bending the facts surrounding the allegations against Letitia James, as far as I'm concerned, she's cooked if this actually goes all the way to trial and she actually gets charged. In my opinion, I assume this man is bending and twisting the facts like crazy. So let's get into it here where it reads baseless allegations. Director Pulte's letter itself, based on media reports, raises 3 issues. One reference out of an entire file of documents to a property in Virginia being Mrs. James' principal residence. one 24-year-old document among a pile of others defining a Brooklyn property as having 5 dwellings when a loan in question calls for only 4, and 2 decades old references, one 42 years old and the other 24 years old, 2 documents filled out by Miss James' deceased father where he either checked a wrong box or misstated his relationship with Miss James to be spousal rather than parental. So essentially, Letitia James' father did a oopsie. And we're going to see that referenced quite a bit here, where essentially all of this stuff is misunderstanding and it's all just oopsies. They were accidents. Oopsies. Let's get into this part right here. Norfolk, Virginia property. In 2023, Miss James assisted her niece, Shamice Thompson Harrison, who needed financial support with the down payment to purchase a home in Norfolk, Virginia. The mortgage application required only one individual to live at the property. Director Pulte cherry-picked an August 17th, 2023 power of attorney that mistakenly, oopsies, stated the property to be Miss James' principal residence, and at the same time absolutely ignored her very clear and all caps statement 2 weeks earlier to the mortgage loan broker that this property will not, in all caps, will not be my primary residence. It will be Shamice's primary residence. Pause right there. Why in the world would you send an email 2 weeks prior to the loan application being filled out stating this will not be my primary residence? That doesn't make any logical sense at all whatsoever, unless you're expecting there to be an oopsie to which you're trying to prepare for that ahead of time. You're starting your damage control before the application is even filled out. So in case sometime in the future, which is now, that this comes back to bite you in the butt, you can say, oh, well, I sent him an email 2 weeks prior to the application being filled out saying that this will not, in all caps also, this will not be my primary residence. Once again, that doesn't make any logical sense because the expectation is that when the application is filled out, it's going to be filled out correctly. You can't anticipate beforehand that there's going to be a mistake. The anticipation is always going to be done correctly. So why would you send that email out beforehand? What would make more sense, which would actually be logical, is if the application was sent out and you got whiffed to the fact that there was an error in the application, then you sent an email out to the mortgage loan broker stating in all caps, whoa, 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 this will not be my primary residence, because now you're trying to fix and rectify the error in the application. That's what normal, regular people do who aren't playing silly games. But in my opinion, when you're playing games, you get your damage control ready beforehand by sending an email out 2 weeks prior to the application being filled out, just in case there's an oopsie. So I can make reference to this and say, hey, I told you that this wasn't going to be mine. I'm not really going for that. That sounds really suspicious and fishy to me because it just, once again, doesn't make logical sense that somebody would do that before the application is filled out. You know what I mean? But anyways, let's carry on. Exhibit A, the broker understood this. This is in reference to the email. The broker understood this and that Miss James was not a Virginia resident and replied, in quotes, section 4 indicates that the property will be occupied as a primary residence of Shamice. Your declaration is marked as non-occupying co-borrower. Once again, why would you be sending that email out 2 weeks before the application was even submitted? That just doesn't smell right to me. That doesn't smell right at all. It smells very funny and very stinky. Now, this goes on to read, furthermore, after the erroneous power of attorney given to the person who would be the principal resident, Miss James filled out a uniform residential loan application, including property occupancy information for the loan. in which she again made clear that the Norfolk property was not her primary residence. Section 5 of the loan application titled Declarations asks, will you occupy the property as your primary residence? And Miss James marked no. And yet, in the hundreds of pages that comprise of the Norfolk loan application and other mortgage documents, Director Pulte points to the 2-page power of attorney that was clearly mistaken and failed to reference Miss James' clear and repeated accurate statements. What are her clear and repeated accurate statements? That you foresaw that this was going to happen. So 2 weeks before the application was submitted and filled out, just to cover yourself, in my opinion, you sent an email saying this will not be my primary residence. Once again, it doesn't make sense. And concerning the uniform residential loan application, maybe someone who is a little bit more of an expert in this field can help me out in the comment section. What is the difference between just a traditional general mortgage application and a uniform residential loan application? So we're talking about 2 applications that were filled out. Letitia James filling out the uniform residential loan application. I'm not sure what the difference is between the two. I'm not sure what the connection and the relationship is between the two. And I'll just leave it at that. I genuinely don't know. But it doesn't negate the fact that the first and original just general mortgage application was filled out mistakenly. It was an oopsie, which you apparently foresaw was going to happen. That's why you sent an email 2 weeks ahead of time telling the mortgage loan broker, hey, brace yourself, just letting you know, just in case, this will not be my primary residence. Sounds fishy to me, but not as fishy as what we're getting ready to read right here. Now let's get into her Brooklyn, New York property. In 2001, Ms. James purchased her Brooklyn, New York home with her savings to facilitate supporting her mother, sick at the time, and give other family members a place to live. Miss James and her family members have lived there since 2001. The co-occupancy dwelling has 4 floors. And for as long as Miss James has lived there, the property has always functioned as a 4-person residence. Initially, James's mother lived on the first floor. Miss James occupied the second floor, and a close family friend occupied the third floor, and her brother occupied the 4th floor. The basement did not have any unit. After Miss James' mother died, and to this day, Miss James has occupied the 1st and 2nd floor units for herself, while close family friend and brother occupy units on the top 2 floors. Director Pulte points to a 24-year-old certificate of occupancy listing the property as having 5 units, despite that the property has functioned as a 4-unit residence for the past 24 years since James bought it. You using this resident as a 4-family resident, despite the fact that it was listed as a 5-family resident, doesn't negate the fact that it's a 5-family resident. The argument that he's laying out here is the equivalent to you living in a 3-bedroom home, but since you and your family members only occupy 2 of the bedrooms, and you've only occupied those 2 bedrooms for 24 years while not utilizing the 3rd bedroom, makes it okay for you to negate the 3rd bedroom and now list your property as a 2-bedroom home and represent it as a 2-bedroom home. Let's say if you're filling out an insurance application and things of that nature. That doesn't make any logical sense. That doesn't make any logical sense, right? And what I also want to focus on is this right here. Look at this. What you're looking at right here, and I brought this up before, Department of Buildings Certificate of Occupancy, Brooklyn Borough, January 6, 2001. As you see it right here, cellar, ordinary use boiler room, basement, 1 family, 1st floor, 1 family, 2nd floor, 1 family, 3rd floor, 2 family, total 5-family dwelling. This building is a 5-family dwelling. What's in question in the criminal referral is the fact that the certificate of occupancy clearly states this is a 5-family dwelling. But then when you come down to Letitia James's mortgage and consolidation application, she misrepresents it as a 4-family dwelling. And what you're going to see here as we carry on with this letter is that this lawyer conflates family dwellings with units. Those are not the same things. And I'm going to prove that to you right now. Let's get back into the letter. In fact, a document he is well aware of, the August 23rd, 2011 Home Affordable Modification Program application, confirms it as being a 4-unit property. That is not what's in question, whether or not it's a 4-unit. That's not what's in question. Worse yet, Director Pulte ignores altogether the other New York City records that list the Brooklyn property as a 4-unit property, including the NYC Department of Finance property records listing the Brooklyn property buildings as Class C3 for families for tax purposes. Example, 4 residential units. Let's stop right here. Look at this. Let's clear this up because this man is a liar. In my opinion, I think, I believe, I assume, right? So I asked Google, is family dwelling and units the same thing in Brooklyn, New York? Google's AI responds, no. Family dwellings and units are not the same thing in Brooklyn, New York, but they are related. A family dwelling refers to a structure intended for occupancy by one or more families, while a unit is a single living space within a large structure. A multi-family dwelling can be thought as a building that contains multiple units, each of which is a dwelling unit. So as you can see here, family dwellings and units are not the same thing, but he is very deceitfully conflating the two in his argument as if they are. It's not the same. And as you can see here, let's come to this portion here where you see class as C3 for families, right? Look at this here. What does building class C3 for families mean in Brooklyn, New York? In Brooklyn, New York, a building classified as class C3 for families typically refers to a building that has 4 separate residential units, each designated as a family residence. Once again, that's referring to the number of units. The number of units in this building has never been in question. The number of units has always been clear. As you can see here, basement, 1 family, first floor, 1 family, second floor, 1 family, third floor, 2 families. Clearly, it is 4 units because the cellar doesn't count. That is not what is in question. What is in question is the reality and the fact that this is a 5-family dwelling, because on the 3rd floor, that unit holds 2 families. That's what's in question. Family dwellings. And it's clearly a 5-family dwelling, and you misrepresented that on the mortgage and consolidation application. As you can see here, dwelling only 4 families. This is the equivalent of conflating illegal immigration with legal immigration. Democrats do this all the time. They conflate the two as if it's the same, and it is not the same. Illegal immigration and immigration are not the same, just like family dwellings and units are not the same. Units, the number of units in the building is not what is in question. This man is a deceitful liar. Once again, in my opinion, I think, I believe, I assume. Let's carry on, right? Exhibit B, in addition, the NYC Department of Housing Preservation and Development lists the Brooklyn property as having 4 A units and 0 B units. Once again, this is not about the number of units. Demonstrating again that Miss James' Brooklyn residence has been used as a 4-unit resident since 2001. Exhibit C, simply put, cherry picking a 24-year-old certificate of occupancy and ignoring the many times the city record says the opposite is what happens when a so-called criminal referral is based on media reports. Media reports simply means, that's the new buzzwords for Democrats that they use to mean social media conspiracy, right? You got that from social media, a far right-wing conspiracy theory page. That's what they mean by that. But once again, this man is disingenuous and is not honest, because what's in question is not the number of units. It's clear there are only 4 units. You lied on the number of family dwellings that can occupy that building, right? And also, just to show you how disingenuous this man is, as we get ready to move on to the last portion, it clearly states here in 2001, Miss James purchased her Brooklyn, New York home. Well, what's the date of the certificate of occupancy? Surprise, surprise, January 6, 2001. How can you cherry pick a certificate of occupancy that is up to date at the time, the same year that you purchased the property? Cherry picking a outdated certificate of occupancy wouldn't make sense if she purchased the building in 2001, but the certificate of occupancy that you're showing me is from 1995. That would make sense. But what you're showing me right here, or I should say what I'm showing you right here, is that the year that she bought the property is the same year that the building that she purchased was certified as a 5-family dwelling, to which she then misrepresented that in the mortgage and consolidation application, as you can see here, referring to it as a 4-family dwelling. Now let's move on to her father, which is apparently her husband, right? Let's get into that next. Now, as we round this out, here we are, Queens, New York property. In 1983, Miss James' father, Robert James, sought to buy a home for his family in the Jamaica neighborhood of Queens, New York. He asked his daughter, then a few years out of school, that's irrelevant to the conversation. That's just lawyer nonsense. Her being a few years out of school has nothing to do with nothing. But anyways, he asked his daughter, then a few years out of school, irrelevant, to help by allowing him to add her name to the mortgage application. Mr. James filled out the mortgage material, wherein he described their relationship as being spouses, and purchased the home without his daughter's involvement. Yet, in a predictable pattern here, Director Pulte cites a mistaken May 20th, 1983 document Mr. James filled out to cast his baseless allegation, while again ignoring other supporting documentation. And on the same exact date that correctly describes Miss James as being his daughter. The actual May 20th, 1983 property deed for the Jamaica Queens residence lists Robert James and Letitia James, his daughter, right? So let's unpack this right here. First things first, a mortgage application and a deed are 2 completely separate documents. They're not related to each other. Okay? Let's break that down. What is the difference between a mortgage application and a deed? Google's AI, all-knowing AI, a mortgage application is the process of seeking a loan from a lender to finance the purchase of a property, while a deed is a legal document that transfers ownership of that property. Essentially, one applies for the loan, mortgage, and then, if approved, a deed is used to officially transfer ownership when the purchase closes. When you come to this website over here called Trust and Will, They break down a deed versus a mortgage. Let's get into that and unpack this just a little bit more because these are two completely separate documents, one having nothing to do with the other. As it pertains to the mortgage is about securing a loan, and the deed is essentially the title of who owns the property or who co-owns the property with me, right? They're not the same thing. You're conflating documentation again. When a person has their name on the deed, it means they hold the title to the property. It does not matter how the property was transferred to them, whether by purchase, gift, or inheritance. The deed is the legal instrument used to transfer title to a property from one party to another, and thus proves who is the current rightful owner of the property. It also highlights the importance of properly recording a deed. A mortgage is another type of contract, an agreement between a financial lender and a borrower. The lender agrees to lend the borrower a sum of money needed to purchase a house in full. The borrower agrees to pay back the amount of money borrowers according to the terms of the mortgage loan. Now, get this, can a person's name be on a deed without being on the mortgage? Yes. Can someone be on the title and not be on the mortgage? Yes. So, what are we establishing here? These are two separate pieces of documentation. One is to secure a loan in which you're hoping to get a low interest rate, and the other one just establishes who's the rightful owner of the home, or who co owns the home, or who the home should be passed down to in the event of my demise. They're not the same thing at all whatsoever. And another thing that's very interesting too is that he only makes reference to the fact that her father, who is now deceased, did this in 1983, but acknowledges at the top of this letter that her father did this twice, 42 years ago, which is 1983, and 24 years ago, which is in the year 2000. So you're telling me that every time her father purchases a home, he mistakes his daughter for his wife every time? And what's more important to know and understand here too is that her father is deceased. So he's no longer living to defend himself. We don't know what his intentions were and why he decided to do this and to what degree that Letitia James was involved. So, with respect to the dead, and I mean no disrespect, please believe me when I say that, I mean no disrespect. But it is very convenient that he unfortunately, respectfully, that he unfortunately is no longer with us. That's very convenient to this case because you can't question him. You can just pawn it all off on him and say, oh, well, her father did a oopsies and he just happened to do the same oopsies twice. But too bad you can't talk to him because unfortunately, he's no longer with us. That's very convenient. And I expect that that's what they're going to run with concerning this situation here. The 1983 situation where he said that Letitia James was his wife. Allegedly, he said that, right? He's no longer with us, so we can't get the truth from him. And in 2000 as well, in which he didn't even reference the time he did that in the year 2000. So let me know what you guys think, man. This was a very horrible attempt, in my opinion, to prove Letitia James as being innocent. This is clearly a lot of twisting and bending of information, documentation. You're conflating documents that have nothing to do with each other. You're bringing up erroneous and just irrelevant statements about Letitia James, recently being out of school. I don't know what that has to do with her father allegedly checking on the application that Letitia is his wife, right? And I have to say allegedly because he's no longer with us. We can't question him. And because we can't question him, we don't know to what degree this was planned between the two of them. We just don't know. There's a lot here that's just completely twisted and upside down and clearly disingenuous. And I'll leave it at that. Getting Hunter Biden's former lawyer as a lawyer to represent you, in my opinion, was a very, very, very bad move. And this letter does not help at all whatsoever. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Is this good enough to get Pam Bondi to throw the investigation in the garbage? I don't think that it is, and I'm curious what you guys think. With all that being said, that does it for today's news. So thank you guys for joining me today. Please hit the like button on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you're new to the channel. Share this video on your social media platforms, and also don't forget to follow me on Telegram at TD Media Group. The link to my Telegram is in the description box below and pinned in the comment section as well. Thank you all for your time. Until next video, peace, and have a great afternoon.